So the larger the church, the more structure it needs in every area of church life, okay? One of my favorite things that Rick Warren said, you know, Rick Warren, he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, The Purpose-Driven Church. He's the pastor of Saddleback Church out in California, in Simi Valley. I love Rick. Do you know what he did with the money for Purpose-Driven Life, by the way?
He gave it back to the church.
So he did 3 things. Number 1, he had his accountant figure out every penny that Saddleback ever paid him, what the interest on that would be from the day that they paid it, and he wrote him a check and canceled his salary. Second thing he did is he set up a trust for him and his wife that paid them the equivalent of their salary for the rest of their life, and then he invested the rest in water projects in Africa. I'm like, God, Rick, write another $1 billion book, make $50 billion doing that with it. Go to town, man. You're doing it right. Anyway, Rick said that he started Saddleback as, I think, 9 families in his living room, and he said what worked as their structure as a church family when they were 20 didn't work when they were 50. And what worked when they were 50 didn't work when they were 100. And what worked when they were 100 didn't work when they were 200. So he said every year for 10 years they had to completely restructure Saddleback Church because it was growing that rapid. Now, so what that means is that the larger your church in every facet of life, the more structure it needs to function effectively. For instance, I joke with folks that at our church of 150, if somebody wanted to borrow some picnic tables and folding chairs, they would just text me. Hey John, we have an event on Saturday. Can we borrow a bunch of stuff? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Do you have keys? Just bring them back. We don't have anything this Sunday, but can you bring them back by next because we have a potluck? Yeah, we'll have them back by next week. Cool. Easy day. Poke my head in there like Thursday. Send them a text again. Hey, you gotta bring those chairs and tables back right there. I need them for Sunday. That's all the structure we need. Now you try to pull that off at a church of 10,000? Probably if you asked to borrow tables and chairs at a church of 10,000, they'd probably say, I'm sorry, we can't do that. Right? If we did that for everybody here, we would never see anything back. So again, smaller churches under 200 function more like an extended family. Is the reality of things. They function like for as functional or dysfunctional as that may be. Larger churches, 500 plus, more like a business. You just have to. The larger the church, the more the pastor becomes a CEO or hires what they call an executive pastor. You know what they call the executive pastor? They call that guy the CEO. You're the chief executive officer. He runs the business. Okay? Likewise, security in smaller churches functions more informally and more familial, but this should not mean sloppy. So, WG, fairly small congregation, 100 people on attendance on any given Sunday. We had a very informal, very easy plan where we had 4 numbers. We had 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we had more than 4 guys, then they would take ancillary roles. Number 1 was in charge of owning the building for the worship center. They were in charge of all medical events that happened there. They were in charge of all security events that happened there. They were in charge of that building. Number 2 was in charge of the secondary building. Anything went down in the secondary building, they took charge of that. They were first responder to it. 3 was communicator. They were outside communication and inside communication with everything that was going on. They were the point of contact. You went through them to see what was going on. 4 was in charge of medical. That was who we were. If I was in the building, which was 45, 48 weeks a year, I was 1. And so it was a weird week when somebody's like, I have to be 1. Weird. Where's John? And we would just kind of huddle up 10 to 15 minutes before service. I got 1. You 2? You 2 today? You got 2? Yeah, I got 2. Man, he's not here. We need somebody to be a 4. Okay, cool. Or oftentimes we got 5 or 6 guys, and we go, no, you're good. Just take the week off or whatever. It was just very informal. Me and a couple of the guys that were kind of security minded. Okay? And that just worked out for us. And it was almost always the same guys. Great. Worked easy. Was that super structured? No, really not super structured at all. But we're just big enough to kind of have a little bit of flex in that. You get a bigger church that has multiple wings, and we've got pocket communication and those kind of things. You've got to structure that. However, smaller churches, I don't want to see that you're like, well, we're little, so we're sloppy. We don't really think about that. We just go, we got it. Nah, that's not enough. Plan that stuff out in advance. Think about it as a team. Okay? It's a big deal. All right, formal versus informal. In terms of your safety team, this is important. Generally, the larger the church, the more formal procedures and organization need to be. I was talking with a friend today who goes to that big old church in the valley, and their security team is so formal that when he just offered a bunch of the guys that were unarmed on the team to go to the range and get some skills, it caught him hell from the leader of their armed security team. That's not your job. That's not what you're doing. We have a plan and a path for that. We're just trying to get dudes out shooting, man. Sorry. caused them problems because they have a very formal structure. And I chuckled with him, you should have known that. You're doing it, okay? Now, again, what we talked about earlier, some church insurance companies really don't like formal teams. However, some require additional insurance riders. So it used to be that Brotherhood Mutual would not even let you have one. And they're about the insurer of about 70% of churches. Now they will. They just do require a waiver and a rider, an insurance rider for it. And they do want you to be trained. They do want people to have some training in order to be a part of the team. Now, you could say, we set the standard of what that training is. And you could say, if you have your CCW permit, you have received enough training to be on our formal team. That's your call. Would I suggest more than that? Yes, I would. Now, that said, I live in Arizona. Arizona is a constitutional carry state. Everybody got a gun on them. Not really, but everybody could. And you just have to kind of put that as part of your plan? Yeah, but you're like, look, you don't count in my plan. If we get a lucky happenstance, then fine. But most of the time, those folks are there. All right, informal doesn't mean sloppy or incapable. Both require training. Both require planning. If you're in a small congregation, we don't want to go through a formal process to get together an informal group of guys and gals that are interested in the church safety. And then talking through, hey guys, what do we think about this? Let's do some of this stuff. How do we get this stuff right? And then maybe talking with your senior leadership, right? Or inviting them in on that. Hey, we really want to talk through this stuff and how we do that. And guess what? In a small church, that could be over somebody's dinner table. Or you could do like us. I love potluck, man. Food makes people stick around, right? Sir?
One of the things we've been, as I mentioned, our team's been around for about 3 years. And
yep.
The elders had a conversation a while back about whether members of the team should be armed. One of the questions that they have, and some of us are, it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell. So and we're wanting to advance past that. And one of the things that they have charged us with is determining what is adequate training for somebody on the team to be armed. So that's something I've been thinking through with the pastor who co-leads the team. Any input on that?
It depends. In some states, it's required that you have the approval of the church board in order to carry a firearm there. So in those places, you really need to set some kind of requirement and say who you will allow and who you won't. Now, of course, that rankles the libertarian in me. If I'm the pastor in those churches, I go, all right, everyone here, ominous, dominus, hockety-pockety is authorized. Now, let's talk about being really good with it so we don't have problems.
One of the things that's been recommended is that we use the Kansas law enforcement qualification course and run them through, and if they pass it, they're good to go.
You do realize that every law enforcement qualification course known to man is like a sobriety test, right? I ain't never seen one that's not. Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, if we said, wait a minute, we said this is a minimum competency, right? So remember what a qual is. A qual is a minimum level of competency. It's not a height to aspire to, okay? I'll tell you that there are other tests that can give you some heights to aspire to. But for instance, to say, hey, we require everybody to at least pass the Kansas State Post Board at the officer level. Sure, well, we don't, and then the guys go, I've got it. Now, me personally, I would say, okay, if you do that, you meet the bare minimum requirements to be on the team, but I don't accept that as a level of competence. You need to clean it. And then once you clean it, now we can start training you to actually be decent with a handgun. And now you can actually do some things. Now, I'll tell you, in my own world, if I can't shoot the FBI qual clean on a 6-inch circle, not on the whole bottle, on a 6-inch circle, I'm pissed. I'm angry at that. I should be able to do that all day long because I want to be able to effectively carry a handgun. I carry it for a reason. It's a risk to me. Carrying a gun is a risk to you, right? There is a risk carrying the gun. You better have a value to it that outweighs the risk. So I really strive for excellence, and I'd encourage everybody else to strive for excellence. Now that said, is everybody going to take that mindset? No. Do people have lives? Yes. Are they going to invest in the training? You will. No. If I was doing something, pass the qual, 8 hours of handgun training minimum per year, quarterly range visit at least per year. Quarterly. That'd be me. Okay, to maintain proficiency. Does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yes, sir.
Great.